The first thing I learned, and the best thing I learned it in the first 10 minutes. And I've never forgotten it, I've tried to live by it. You come in there and it's a closed environment. There are no civilians there. These are the upper class cadets who are introducing the prospective new cadet into West Point. And the first thing this first classman tells me is, you've got these answers to anything I say to you. No, sir. Yes, sir. Sir, I do not understand, and no excuse, sir. And he had me quote those back, and I remember no excuse, sir, and it was ingrained on my thinking that I have no excuse for failure anytime I do not meet the standards that I'm supposed to meet. My standards are those that are set for me by someone for whom I'm working. My being the company commander of that Ranger company was almost a unique circumstance, if it was not unique. I graduated from West Point in 1949 and went to the officers' general course at Fort Riley, like all of new second lieutenants did. And then in January of 1950, I came to Fort Benning for the infantry officers' basic course. It's a similar course that we have today, but incidentally, it's much better today. And I graduated from jump school and got my orders changed to go to, headed toward Korea. And when you got to Japan, there was a 3-day time period in which you were processed and records checked and medical records checked and all of those things checked, and then you were assigned. I had been assigned to the 24th Infantry Division, was to leave that night, but I got an announcement over the PA system that sounded all over the post, Camp Trade, Japan. And it said, Second Lieutenant Ralph Puckett, report to room so-and-so in the headquarters building. And I kind of skiffed myself up and went in there and reported and gave the best military salute and report I could to this very distinguished Lieutenant Colonel sitting behind a field folding desk. He said very quietly, the first thing he said after giving me at ease, and I stood at a rigid parade dress, being in front of a Lieutenant Colonel and being a scared second lieutenant, he said, I'm selecting volunteers for an extremely dangerous mission behind enemy lines. I said, sir, I volunteer. He said, don't you want to know what the mission is? I said, yes, sir, but I volunteer. He went on to talk to me for a while, and he found out I had absolutely no experience whatsoever, not one day of troop duty. I was a brand new second lieutenant just out of the basic course in jump school. He said, well, I'll think about this, and he said, I've already selected the lieutenants for the company. And I said, sir, I want to be a ranger so badly that I volunteered to take a job as a squad leader or a rifleman if you'll take me into that ranger company. He said, I'll give you my decision tomorrow. So he told me to come back at 9 o'clock the next morning, and I was there at 8:30 to be sure I was on time. And he brought me in, I gave another real snappy salute, and he gave me at ease. And I said, he said, I've decided to take you into the Ranger Company, and you're going to be the company commander. And I said to myself, dear God, please don't let me get a bunch of good guys killed. Because I knew I didn't know enough to be a squad leader, probably didn't know enough to be a rifleman. But I decided that I would do my best, and with God's help, wouldn't get a bunch of good guys killed. I learned this from my Ranger company, both in the training, and let me say a little bit about the training. If there was ever a unit that was destined to fail, I would say it was the 8th Army Ranger Company. The TO&E called for 74 enlisted men and 3 officers, 1 captain, 2 lieutenants, and 2 rifle platoons, 2 Ranger platoons. We started the training with 73 enlisted men and ended with 63. We lost 10 who didn't measure up. Those soldiers were service troops. They were good soldiers, but they were Adjutant General Corps, Transportation, Ordnance, Engineer, Ordnance, good soldiers, but we couldn't take any infantrymen from the infantry divisions because they were too short. One of the divisions went to Korea 7,000 soldiers short. Besides being short a lot of their equipment, a lot of training, and a lot of other things, We were desperately unprepared for fighting a war in Korea or any other place at that time. But by this hard training and then seeing them in action and what they were doing, I'd already had this belief, and it was supported in my belief, that you can take good men and by combat-focused, realistic, high-standard training, turn them into combat instrument, effective soldiers, rangers, and it can be done to just about anybody who has the motivation and who goes through the training program, a training program that demands the best. Our soldiers are capable of great things. We have some great leaders here, both non-commissioned officers and officers, and they have the capability to take these soldiers and turn them into outstanding soldiers. You know the reputation that our Army has today. It's probably the most qualified, combat qualified Army we've ever had because of the 12 years that the war has been going on. Okay, now, when we use special forces in the way that you're using it, I believe you're talking about special operations.
I'm talking about elite soldiers. I'm talking about the elite,
You're talking about Delta Force, you're talking about the Rangers, you're talking about special forces, you're talking about
our elite
Night Stalkers. What they have today, they have more of a recent heritage. They have more competent, more experienced leaders than we had coming along. They have more emphasis on training that the ordinary Army had back then and still has. They have a chance to volunteer. They have to volunteer for it, so that puts a greater responsibility on them. They have seen what Special Operations Forces have done and are doing and can do. Teal Seam 6, a Navy force. Osama bin Laden, what they have done. That's an inspiration to every American, I would say, and certainly an inspiration to the soldiers and Special Operations Forces. We have to earn the reputation that they built for us, that they earned for us. But I perceive that our young soldiers today, whether they're Special Operations, and I felt this when I would view Ranger units in training, and I feel this in our regular Army units, our big Army as we say, they can do so much more than we expect. And I've been listening to that right here at this Infantry Training Center for 24 years. I moved here to Columbus 24 years ago. And one of the first things I did was to go down to the basic training units. And I talked to the Ranger, to the instructors, the RIs. No, I was a Ranger instructor, the drill sergeants. And they invariably said, well, this young men aren't like you were when you were coming along. You did all of these things, but these young men, they don't do anything but watch TV, and we have a hard time with them. Those sergeants who were the instructors who were saying that, their drill instructors were saying that about them 15 years earlier. The drill instructors are still saying, these soldiers, they come, and this is a fact, they come here, they're overweight, they're soft, they've never done anything, they've never had to work hard. Most of them, some of them have done some hard work. Most of them have never worked hard, and it's almost overpowering for many of them. But somehow or another, the Army discipline and the Army training and the Army leadership, and in particular, the Army non-commissioned officer takes that raw material and turns him into a soldier who can win on the battlefield that's unforgiving and very dangerous. I don't know if they're unsung. I know this, that practically every time General McMaster, or the General Brown, or the generals before him, and now General Miller, and any of our commanding officers and any of our officers are talking about the training here at Fort Benning, and throughout the Army, they give credit to the non-commissioned officers, and they say they're the ones, and I say this, they're the ones who really make the Army today what it is. And I've heard this from some of the rank who've been here at Fort Benning that for years, that when foreign officers come here to look at our training, they used to come here to want to see what we did with the officers. And they still see that. But what they really want to see is how do you take your low-ranking enlisted and turn them into the best non-commissioned officers in the world. That's what they want to learn. Because what little bit experience I've had with some armies, other places, the NCOs don't have the responsibility, they don't have the training, they don't have the capability that we do. They are the ones who need to be developed in order to improve the armies of our allies. The people in Columbus and the other people I've seen appreciate the soldiers, but they really have no understanding of what the soldier does. And what I'd really like to see, back many years ago, back when I was a lieutenant and a captain, in some of the training classes or problems for the students, lieutenants, captains, and NCOs, they would have tremendous demonstrations, and they would invite the public out for the rehearsal time, or even the actual class, and they would see all this that's going on and get some idea of what it is to attack a fortified position, as an example, or some idea to come under an assault by an artillery battalion, or get some idea of what it is to be pinned down by machine gun fire. Of course, it's not firing at our soldiers, but it's simulated. So I think we could come back to do that and get more civilians out here to see our real training. They come out for the 4th of July, and that's a great day, but that doesn't tell us much about the Army. They come out here to see the parachute jumps. That's great, and that shows you the thrill and the excitement of being a paratrooper. Most of them who come to Ranger graduation, that's a great ceremony, but it's still a ceremony. And I'd like to see Fort Benning do, and I'll probably get in trouble for this, I'd like to see Fort Benning do more to get civilians out here to see training, not just to come to receptions and parades and things of that nature. Parade is great. I go to everyone I get a chance to go to, but it doesn't tell me much about what the Army does. I'm very concerned.
Why?
I'm concerned for a lot of reasons. I'm concerned, I look at the national level, the government, and I am not enamored with either the Democrats or the Republicans, or the administration, or the previous administrations. I think they have failed miserably. It seems like the government today, all they can do is argue. They can't seem to decide on anything. So our government is in bad shape. Those are the politicians and the money that comes in to influence those people. I have a very unhealthy feeling toward them. I think that we are getting to have a society that's more and more separated than the military and the civilian. Just like I was talking about a moment or two ago, we have support here, but people don't really know anything about the Army. And they don't really have a feel for what soldiers and the Air Force and the Marines, and what they go through, because they don't have a dog in the fight. They don't have a member of their family who is undergoing training for that, or who has been in combat and who has suffered, who may have been killed. They don't have that feeling. They don't have a dog in the fight. We support you. But in our country today, there are about 300+ million people. Less than 1% of that population serves. Now 1% includes all ages, but that's very few. In our Army, there are about 32 million people in the cohort 17 to 24 years old. And that's the cohort, the age group from which we get most of our soldiers, our military, 17 to 24. There are 32 million of them. If all of those 32 million walked into an Army recruiting store and said, I volunteer for the Army, only 1 out of 4 would be accepted. 3 out of 4. 24 million people in our country, which should be the best qualified physically, mentally cohort in our country. 3 out of 4 are unqualified. They're unqualified because they're obese, because they're physically unfit, because they've got emotional problems, because they've got drug problems, because they lack education, because they've had trouble with the law. They have psychological, emotional problems. So 3 out of 4 of our young people aren't fit to serve. So that is a major concern of mine. I think you got to have both. I think you have to be mentally tough. By mentally, I'll change that somewhat. You got to be smart. You got to be psychologically tough. You've got to be able, and this is hard for everybody, some harder than others. You've got to be able to steel yourself for the trauma, the mental trauma that you're facing. And I had a mentor, Lieutenant Colonel Louis G. Mintis, who had been a battalion commander. And I got Colonel Mintis over in the corner and I said, sir, someday I'm going to be in combat and I know I'm going to be afraid. How do I handle that? He looked me straight in the eye and he said, Ralph Puckett, if you're thinking about yourself, you're not doing your job. The Army didn't pay you, they didn't train you to think about yourself. They taught you and trained you to look after your men. When the going gets tough, that way, not physically, well, even physically, but when the going gets tough and you get afraid, get up and go check on your men. You'll be too busy to think about yourself. Well, I tried to remember that, and I'll say it works to a degree. There were sometimes, and I have to admit this, there were sometimes I was so afraid I thought I was going to vomit, but I had to do the job. And I think that's what you have to be able to do, is do what it takes when the going gets tough. But when you have good people who are depending on you and you're depending on them, it becomes easy. We are a team. I never accomplished anything by myself. Everything that was worthwhile that I've accomplished came about because I was supported by great people helping me along the way. And particularly in the early stages, it was those NCOs. Sir, maybe we ought to do so-and-so. Sir, what do you think about such and such?
You listened to those guys, didn't you?
They knew more than I knew. I sure did.
Did you see this week the Medal of Honor was awarded to a soldier for his actions in Afghanistan, where he was a lone survivor? Did you see that service?
I did.
Did you see his speech? It was very
I did.
where he said, my name's not important.
Right.
And he read off the list of the
Right.
9 names
Right.
of comrades that were killed.
Right.
Is that a soldier? Is that the epitome of the American soldier today?
That's the epitome of that soldier. And I say this about the Medal of Honor recipients. I don't use the term winner. It's not a contest. It's a fight. He was as great as any man can be at one time in his life, and that was that time. He may go on to other great things, but he did a great job, unmatched job, just wonderful. I'm really proud of my wife and my kids. They're great. They've inspired me to try to be all I could be, to never be satisfied with what I've done. And I never am. I think I could always have done a little better, no matter where. I could do better in this interview than I'm doing.
I'm not so sure you could, sir.
I'm proud of them. I'm proud of, in a military service, I'm most proud of the fact that as a second lieutenant, with great support, I managed to train and command the 8th Army Ranger Company in combat, and they did a good job. I'm most proud of that and what those soldiers did. It has affected me throughout my life, and my continuing contact with the Rangers continues to affect me. And I feel that I have to live up to the Ranger creed today. I've been out of the Army since 1971, that's a long time. But I still feel it today that if I goof up, no matter what it has to do, if I goof up with this interview, for example, I'm letting the Rangers down. I really feel that. I've got that Ranger tab tattooed on my heart, way down deep inside of me. I've got to live up to that, and I'm still trying to do it.